Well, hello Internet, and welcome to my Express NodeJS video tutorial. In this one tutorial, I'm going to give you a very massive overview of the Express NodeJS framework and pretty much cover all the different things aside from how you would interact with databases. I'm going to break this into 3 tutorials. I was going to make it originally 1, but it just became overwhelming. So I'm going to give you an overview of Express in this tutorial. Then in the next part, I'm going to cover databases, and then in the final part, we're going to make a big application. Now, Express is the Node.js framework that's going to provide all of the capabilities of Node.js, but it's also going to allow us to easily develop robust web applications using something called middleware. You're going to have a pretty good understanding of how Bootstrap and Handlebars work before you can use this tutorial, and I have tutorials on those in the description underneath the video, so watch those first if you have no idea what Bootstrap and Handlebars are. And now what I'm going to do is show you how to install everything both on Windows as well as on Linux machines and Mac OS. Now, if you're on Windows, what you're going to want to do first is download Node.js. So you're going to go to nodejs.org and just click on Mature and Dependable. You're going to get a little message. Do you want to run this? Yes, say Run. And then you're going to do a whole bunch of clicking on Next. So click on Next right here. Click on Accept the License Terms. Click on Next. It's perfectly fine to put this in your program files. Click on Next. Leave everything exactly the way it is. Click on Next, and then click on Install. Then after everything's installed, we're going to go in and verify that everything was installed properly. To do that, you're going to want to open up your command prompt, and this is inside of Windows, but you're going to be doing pretty much the same exact thing in Macintosh, so just stick around here and do pretty much the same thing. So I'm going to show you how to do it in Macintosh though, so don't worry. So very first thing we want to do is verify that Node's installed, so we're going to type in node-v, and it's going to pop up the version of Node that we have installed. Then what we're going to do is type in npm init like that, and this is going to create our package.json file, which is going to define the entry point for our Express application. And for the most part, you're just going to be using defaults. Whenever you type this in, it's going to either pop up your name or ask you for your name. Just type that in, and then you're going to see all the other different things you're going to have to type in thereafter. We're going to leave this be as version 1. You're going to want to give a little description. I just typed the Express tutorial. That's perfectly fine. Here's your entry point. It's pretty common to use index.js, but I personally don't like to use it very much because there's too many index files inside of web applications. It sometimes becomes a little bit complicated, so I call this express.js. Test command I'm going to leave as blank. Get repository I'm going to leave as blank, and so forth and so on. You can see everything that I did right there, and then you can see that it went and created that file for us. Then what I did is I opened up the directory that's going to have, there's the JSON file that was just created for us, and this is just to show you how the directory is all set up. And you can see right here, this is the JSON file that we created. And what you're going to want to do is right after version here, you're going to want to put a comma, and you're going to want to type in private and true, and then resave that. And that's going to keep us from getting a whole bunch of different errors. And this is Notepad++ if you were wondering, but you can use any type of text editor as long as it's not Microsoft Word or something like that. You want a generic text application. Then what we're going to want to do is go in and install Express. So again, in the command prompt, you're going to type in npm install --save and then Express, and it's going to install everything there for you. Once again, we're going to want to install Handlebars, so we can use that in our application. So type in npm install --save Express-handlebars right like that, and that's going to install. And then here you can see exactly how we're going to be testing everything. And you can see here in a really simple type of Express application is going to allow us to test that everything was actually installed. So the very first thing we're going to do is go var express is equal to require express. And this is just going to import our Express module for us to be able to use. Right here with app set port, we're going to be defining that the web application is going to be run on port 3000. And then inside of Express and Node.js, you're going to define things called routes. Right here, I'm just going to use the default /root, which is just going to be just a basic access to the most basic of URL, so it would be something like localhost 3000 for port 3000. And what this is basically saying is whenever you go to that in your URL or in your browser, it's just going to print out a message on the browser window that's going to say Express works, so we know that that all works. And then right down here you can see that it's going to basically tell our web application to listen on port 3000 for any instructions in regards to what information to push out. And then console log is just going to print Express started, press Ctrl C to terminate. Then, to actually run this application, you're going to want to save this first, and I called this Express.js. You saw me point to that file previously whenever we were setting up the JSON file. To start your server, you're going to type in node express.js, and you can see right there, Express started, press Control-C to terminate, and that's exactly what you have here. And then if you go into your browser and type in localhost :3000, ExpressWorks prints out, and ExpressWorks comes from this point right here. So that is how we go in and install Express and Node.js and a whole bunch of other different things inside of Windows. And you can see here the actual layout of everything. So I have a directory called Express.tut. Inside of it, there's Node modules. That was all installed for us. Express.tut, that was the file we were using, and here is our JSON file. So now what I'm going to do is jump over into Macintosh and install pretty much exactly the same things, and then go about creating the rest of our application and exploring the world of the Express framework. Okay, so here is our Express.tut directory, and everything's going to be the same on Windows and Macintosh. So what we're going to want to do here first is we're going to want to create a public directory, and then inside of that I'm going to have images, and they're just going to be my logos that I'm going to use here just for my sample website. I'm going to have another thing called randomfile.txt, just going to have some random text in it because I'm going to show you how to read and write text files. We're also going to have a views directory, and inside of there you're going to have to create two directories called layouts and partials, just like that. Feel free to hit pause and do all this stuff. I'm just moving along here so we don't waste time. You're also going to want to create a readme file. And let's just go into this tutorial here. Now I'm going to go ls. You would type in dir if you're on Windows. And I'm going to go in and say that I want to open everything in Sublime Text. And I'm going to type in subl like that. And now I have everything here. So I have Sublime Text here. I have my terminal or command line if you're on Windows. And over here I'm going to have the actual application, which is going to be run on localhost and the port of 3000. And you can see the directory structure that we have right here. Let's jump over and look at the README file. Right here you're basically just going to describe your project, right like this. And we're going to use a markdown language that is going to allow us to convert into HTML. And this is just a kind of overview of exactly how that works. I'm not going to get into that too much. All of these files are available in a link in the description, but right here we're just going to simply come in and document or explain what our project's going to do. Very important to create that, however. So just like I did in Windows, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to type in npm init inside of that directory, and you can see Express.tut comes in there. That's perfectly fine. Version 1 is perfectly fine. Description, I'm going to type in Express tutorial, and everything from this point on is going to be all typed out, all the code and everything. I'm going to call this Express.tut.js, and this is going to be the main application we're going to be working with here. Test command, leaving that blank. Get repository, leaving that blank. Keywords, leaving that blank. Author, you can type in Derek Banis if I'd like. ISC for the license. Is this okay? Yes is the default. Just hit enter, and now it's created. And here is our package.json file. And just like I showed you on Windows, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say private : and then I'm going to type in true, and then put another comma inside of there. And then I'm going to save that file and I'm going to close it. Now I'll jump back over inside of here in our terminal, and I'm going to install Express. So I'm going to go npm install -- save Express, and Express is going to be installed, and you can see different things popping up over here. So there we go, and everything looks like it installed perfectly fine. Now I'm going to come in and install Handlebars. I'm going to go npm install -- save Express Handlebars, and that also looks like that installed perfectly fine. Yes, it did. I'm also going to come over here and create another file inside of the main Express.tut application. So I'm going to go new file right here, and I'm going to say ignore packages installed by npm, because I'm going to set up Git on this. I'm going to say node modules. That's where we're going to have all those different packages installed. *tilde ds store. This is a Macintosh only thing. And then I'm going to have something else called credentials, which we're going to create here in a little bit. .js. And then I'm going to save this. Make sure that I save it in the main directory, Express.tut. And this is just going to be called git ignore. And whenever I save this, it's going to give me an error. I'm going to say use that, and that's perfectly fine. If you're not using Git, you don't need to use this at all, but I just wanted to also cover how to use Git. So that's closed. Now I'm going to come in here. If I want to create a Git repository, I'm just going to say git init like this. And then I could come in and add files if I'd like. So Git, I also have a Git tutorial if you're at all interested in that. And then if I want to also come in here and commit all these changes, I can go git commit -m initial commit. I'm not going to be dwelling on Git, and if you have no interest in Git, don't worry about this. and there you can see everything went inside of there perfectly fine. So now that we have all the basics basically set up here, and we're going to jump in here and just start creating our Express application. Okay, in our main application, I'm going to come in here and create a new file, and I'm going to save this file, save as, and make sure we save it in the main part of our directory, and this is going to be called Express.js, and then click on save. And basically what we're going to do here is structure a series of possible responses depending upon the URL that is requested in the browser. And then as we travel through the pipeline, which is going to be a bunch of URLs and then responses to those URLs typed into the browser, we're going to perform different actions using either middleware functions or just our own code that we'll be typing inside of there. Now, if a response is going to be valid, we will display the correct view on the screen, and if not, we're going to handle different types of errors. So right here at the very line number 1, this is going to be our entry point for our application. So the very first thing we're going to do, just like you saw before, is import our Express module. I'm just going to call this Express equal to require Express. And I assume that you have a background in JavaScript, otherwise you wouldn't even be here. Then we're going to define our application, Express. Now I'm going to go through a whole bunch of other different things that we didn't cover previously. I'm going to go in and type in app disable x powered by, and this is just going to block our header from containing information about our server, just for security reasons. You don't need to know much more about it other than that. And now I basically want to set up handlebars so that this is going to work for us in our application as well. So I'm going to go over here in our layouts file right here, and I'm going to say new file, and I'm going to say file, save as, and I'm going to type in main handlebars and save that. And we already installed the handlebars modules, so we'll be able to use that. And then I'm going to create a whole bunch of other different things that are going to be displayed on the screen whenever the user types in different URLs. And I'm going to do that specifically in our views directory. So I'm going to say new file, and I'm just going to keep this quite simple. I'm just going to go save as, and you can see right there it's in the views directory. And I'm going to type in home handlebars like this and save, create another one, new file, file save as, again make sure it's in the views directory, and I'm going to type in about handlebars and save that, create another one, 404 handlebars, save that, and then finally 500.handlebars and save that. Okay, so we have all of those created. Now let's go and throw some HTML inside of those. I'm going to jump over into the home.handlebars first, and I'm just going to keep this very simple. I'm going to go div class is equal to page header, which is going to provide me a little bit of a styling inside of this. And then I'm just going to throw an h3 tag inside of here, and then inside of it I'm going to say welcome to my Express tutorial. Then I'm going to copy this. I'm going to use basically the same format for all the other ones. So jump over into about.handlebars, paste this inside of here, and then I'll just do something simple like about us, perfectly fine, save that. 404 handlebars, just come inside of here and type in 404 not found, which is going to be the page that it goes to whenever they can't find the URL you requested. And then in the 500, type in 500 and server error, which is going to be the page you go to when there's a server error. And that's basically all we need to do with those, so let's just close those out. Now we're back up inside of Express.js, that same file again. And here what we're going to have to do is define that main.handlebars is going to be our default layout. And then that default layout is going to take the specific information that we just defined for those URLs, home, about, 404, and 500, and transport them into the layout folder. So why don't we jump over and actually create main.handlebars instead here. We want to first do a little bit of house cleaning. So we'll go into views, and then we're going to go into partials right here. There's nothing in there right now. Let's create a new file. And then we're going to paste inside of here everything that we want to go at the very top inside of our head section. So you're going to see right here exactly what all these different things do. Here we're going to tell Internet Explorer to use the latest rendering engine. That's what that does. We want to set the page width on our device, and we also want to set our zoom level to 1. Right here we are installing Bootstrap, and let's just do a view and word wrap so everything fits on the screen. And then right here we are installing jQuery. Once again, all of this code is available in the description underneath the video, and of course it's free. So then what we're going to do is we're going to want to save this inside of our partials directory right here, and we're just going to call this head.handlebars, so we keep everything all separated and keep our code very clean. And we're going to say save. Then we can get rid of that. We don't need it anymore. Likewise, we're going to come in and create another partial Go new file inside of here. And then inside of this, what we're going to do is create our Bootstrap nav bar, which is going to be very responsive and nice for us. And you can see right here, there's not really much to see here, just basic copy and paste everything directly inside of there. But you can see right here, I am pointing to my images directory, and that is where I have my logo. If we go and open that up, you can see right here, entity logo small.ping. And like I said, I covered all this in the Bootstrap tutorial. You can also see here I'm going to have an about, a contact, and I'm also going to have a place where they're going to be able to upload files. So this guy, we're going to save as bs navbar.handlebars. And you're going to see here in a second whenever I import that. So save that. And then we can close that out as well. Now I'm going to be able to jump into main.handlebars, and this is going to be, like I said, the main layout that we're going to define inside of here. And this is just basic HTML, so we're going to go doc type HTML, just like always. Then we'll type in HTML. Well, actually throw all that in there for me. Pretty awesome. I'm also going to come in and go language is equal to English. The title for this is going to be Express Tutorial. And then I have all those head files I had before, all this stuff that I want to go inside of every single file. So I'm going to go in and reference that partial. And how we reference partials is 2 curly brackets, and then we're going to type in head, which is the name of the file, the name, see, head, handlebars. We'll just type in head, and all that stuff's going to be automatically imported inside of there. Actually, I want to put this before the title section. So there we go, nice and clean. Then inside of the body section, I'm also going to want to reference the navigation bar, so that shows up inside of here. Partial again, and I'm just going to go like this, and then I'm going to reference whatever the file name is, which is bs navbar. Then after this, I'm actually going to have to put a section inside of here where the HTML, all the stuff that I defined here, this right here is automatically going to go right inside of here. If I go and put 3 curly brackets and then type in body inside of there, and that's all I need to do. And to keep this nice and neat, I'm also going to surround this with a div, and I'm going to give this the class name of container, which is another little trick, nice little styling tool that's provided to us with Bootstrap. And then after all of this is all set up, I'm going to come in here and throw in a script tag, and that script tag is going to have the reference to Bootstrap, so that Bootstrap is going to work here as well for us. Again, copy and paste, get all that in the same place. And that is all we're going to have to do for our layout file, which is main.handlebars, and it's in our main layouts directory. So let's save that, and we can close it. We're done with it. Now, once again, in Express.js, our main Express application, we need to define that main.handlebars is our default layout. And to do that, we're going to go var handlebars is equal to, and we'll go require Express handlebars, which we installed very early on. And then after that, we'll just say create and define our default layout. So just type in default layout colon and then main, and then put a semicolon at the end, of course. And then we have to go app engine handlebars and handlebars engine, and all of that is going to be set up for us. And then app.set, and our view engine is also going to be handlebars. So that's going to make sure that the HTML that we defined in our views directory is going to be transported into the main.handlebars layouts. Now, as we go on, we're going to be importing a couple other different things, but I just want to get the server up and running to make sure everything is installed properly. So I'm going to do something like more imports here, just to reference where I want to go later on. And now I'm going to define the port that our application is going to run on. So I'm going to go app.set port process environment port or 3000. So this is going to run on port 3000. Another thing I want to do is go app.use express static and 2 underscores for directory name plus public. And what this is going to allow me to do is access this public directory that we have up inside of here, and then reference our images folder so that we'll be able to import that logo into our main navigation bar. So you can see right here, see image, and it automatically jumped in there and it grabbed that image folder. The reason why is because we put this in here and referenced our main directory as being public for us. Just keep everything a little bit shorter and nicer and easier to work with. Now we need to come in and define some routes, which is basically just going to match up certain actions with certain URLs that are typed into our browser. So we're going to go app.get, and basically what app.get gets is it's going to receive a path as well as a function, and this is what's going to be known as defining our route. So our base directory is how we would define this right here. And then we would define function inside of there. Now the path isn't going to be case sensitive, so if this was something like about or about, they would be exactly the same, but I'm just going to keep it that way. Just remember that those are not case sensitive. And about, whether any of the letters are uppercase or lowercase or whatever, doesn't really matter. Inside of the function, you're going to have a request object passed inside of here, which is going to represent an HTTP request. And it's going to contain things like query strings, parameters, bodies, headers, and so forth and so on. Then you're going to also have a response object, and this is going to represent the response Express is going to send back whenever it receives a request. So we're going to close that off right there. And all we want to do here is point to our view that we created over here, which is home.handlebars. Sorry about the zooming there a little bit. And to point to that, you're just going to type in res, render, and then home, which is going to reference the home handlebars. And what this is going to do is going to use the main layout, which is main.handlebars, and it's going to transport inside of it all of the HTML right here that we defined in home.handlebars, exactly right here where we have body. You're going to see in this second here exactly what that looks like. And we can save that. And now basically all we have to do now is tell our application which port to listen to. So I'm going to go app, listen, app.get, our port that we defined above, and then define the function that we're going to call. And you saw this before. This is just going to print out in the console or inside of the terminal something like Express started on HTTP localhost. And then we can jump out here and get our port if we'd like, app.get, and then type in port, and that'll just put that in there in text format. And then we could say press Control-C to terminate. Put that there, and then make sure we put a semicolon right there, and file save it. And then we're going to jump over here and make sure we're in the correct directory. So we can go pwd, we're in the express.js directory, and you can see right here, express.js is right there. And then to run our server, we would just type in node express.js. And you can see right there the message, Express started, And I had a little bit of a bug here. Just go up to app set where it has view engine and make sure that you put quotes around the handlebars part right there. And if you save that, you're going to see that it automatically puts all that information there on the screen. You're also going to see, if we come in here, well, we click on this guy right here and click on about. It's going to pop up a little message that says can't get about, and the reason why is over in the Express we only defined this route right here. So what we basically need to do is define all of the other routes, and that's the main concept behind creating an Express application. But everything else is basically set up, and you can see right here that it went and automatically put in our navigation bar, and we'll fit in all the other different things we have right here. So now we basically just sit here and go and create continual different routes until we've covered all of them and all the capabilities we want to add. Alright, so now let's go in here and actually set up about so that it works, and we're basically going to do exactly the same thing here again, so I might as well copy this. So we'll throw that inside of there, except we're going to type about inside of here instead, and about right here, which once again is a reference to about.handlebars, so it automatically renders that. I'm going to save it. We're going to have to restart our server. So Control-C that, restart the server, and then if we come over here and click on about, you're going to see about us pops directly inside of there. Now I'd like to talk about a middleware. Now this is basically going to be an example of middleware, and what it's going to do is it's going to receive a request object and a response object like before, and then as well a next function. And what this is just going to simply do is sit in the middle, and it's going to perform a function, which in this situation is going to pop up in the console the URL that is being looked at. And we're going to use app.use here instead of app.get. So we're going to type in function. It's going to receive a request object, a response object, and a next function. And the next function is going to point at this guy to continue looking for the proper route. So pretty simple stuff. So if we want to say, all right, console log, and the job of this is to basically log what URL that's being looked for, we're going to say looking for URL. And then we can get the URL that they're looking for by going request object and URL, semicolon, and then finally we would type in next so that we can continue looking for our routes. But you can also do other different things with middleware. For example, if they would look for a URL that doesn't exist, we could throw an error. So we could say app.get, and let's say they're looking for the URL of junk. We could go and handle this for us. And again, it's going to be much the same. We're going to go request object, response object, next function, close that off. And then here we'll go console log, and we'll say tried to access the junk URL, which doesn't exist. And if we want to throw an error, we'll go throw new error, and we'll say our error message is going to be junk doesn't exist. And since we have a single quote here, we're going to want to backslash this so that we'll be able to print that out. Doesn't exist. And then to catch an error that is defined inside of here, we'll go app.use function error request object response object and next again. And then here we could print out to our log something like error, and then print out whatever the error message was that was sent, which is going to be junk doesn't exist, error message. And the rest of this tutorial is going to be very much like this. I'm just going to introduce a whole bunch of different things, explain how they work, so that you'll be able to experiment with them, so that you'll be, or will have, a good understanding of them whenever we create larger applications. So let's just save that. Again, we're going to have to shut down our server, and then restart our server. And you can see here, if we jump in and go junk, for example, that it's going to print out tried to access junk, and it's going to say junk doesn't exist. And it's also going to say up here that we can't get a hold of junk. We could also throw it to another URL, so that'll be able to be handled. And to do that, we're going to have to create our 404 and our 500 URLs for our Express application. And this is going to act like middleware again, because we're not going to have a 404 means that the URL doesn't exist. So we're going to use app.use. You're going to see a bunch of examples of middleware here. We're going to function request response, and we're going to define the content type that we're going to be displaying on the screen. In this situation, it's going to be text HTML, because we already defined a 404 handlebars HTML that we want to put there. We could also come in and define our status, which is going to be 404, and we can also come in and define what we want to render, which is going to be the 404 handlebars file. You can see render is all we need to do. Why don't we go in here and also create our 500 page, which is going to be a server error. Again, we're going to use app.use again, because it's not going to be a specific URL we're going to work with here. However, this is going to be an error situation. So we're going to go next, and we could do something like print our error in our console, error stack. We can define our status, which is going to be 500, of course. And we can also come in and say that we want to render. This is our response. We're going to say we want to render our 500.handlebars file once again and display that on the screen. And we can file save that. And now in this situation, well, we want to reload this. So Control C, restart our server, jump over here. And now you can see that it went in here and it hit the error. Junk doesn't exist. All that stuff's still printed down here. However, because of next right here, it jumps over about, because that's not a matching URL. And you can see that it comes down here and it was a 404 error. That's how that matched up, because it was searching for a URL that didn't exist, and it still printed out that. So a little bit nicer than just printing out a dead sort of message there. It actually went to a page. Now what we want to do is come in and create another view, and this is going to be for contacts. So we're going to go into views and new file, and we're going to say save as, and we're going to call this contact.handlebars. Save this in the views directory. And this is basically just going to be a form that's going to allow them to send us information, and we can mess around with that information. You can see right here, this is the important part. We're going to have process, form, contact us, and I'm going to be bouncing back and forth between this and the other code that we have here. You're going to see exactly how we're going to be able to process that information. So we're going to just save that for now and come back to it in a second. Let's jump back over into Express.js and more imports up here. And I'm going to have to come in here, and first off, what I'm going to need to do is install body parser, which is going to allow us to parse encoded data whenever we're using post. So I'm going to jump over here and I'm going to shut down our server and zoom in here so you can see this a little bit better. I'm going to go npm install -- save body parser, and that's going to install for us. And I might as well go in here and install a couple other things. I'm also going to show you exactly how we're going to allow the user to upload files. And to be able to upload files, we're going to use another piece of middleware called Formidable. So to install that, npm install -- save Formidable, and that will install. And if anything's a little bit confusing, don't worry about it. I'm going to go over this stuff over and over and over again, and this is just an overview to sort of get you inclined to understand exactly what's going on. And I'm also going to cover how we're going to be able to use cookies. So of course I'm going to need some cookie middleware. So I'm going to go npm install -- save and we're going to get cookie parser, and that'll install. And there we go. Now we got all the different things we're going to need here. We get rid of this right here and then start installing those. So just to get all this to work, I'm going to go app.use, and I'm going to go require body parser. And like I said before, this is going to be required whenever we're using post to parse encoded data. So I go URL, encoded, extended, true. And then we're going to get formidable as well. And this is just going to import this module for us to use. And just make sure you spell it right, because it's a weird word. Another thing I want to do is create another file called credentials, which is going to allow me to secure my cookies and help with sessions, which we're also going to get into here in a moment. So let's jump out here to our main directory and go new file. And we're going to save this, save as, make sure it's in the main directory where you have Express.js. And I'm going to type in credentials.js and save that. And I'll go module exports, and you'll see here in a second how we'll be able to get access to this. And I just got to give this a name. And like I said before, this is going to help us with security. So we go cookie secret. And then inside of here, you're going to throw in just a random bunch of strings. Something you can remember, I guess, if that's important. So I'm going to go forceability, and I could do something like Luke father, since we're all thinking about Star Wars right now, and then close that off. And then we can save that, and that's all we need to do. Jump back over into Express.js and reference our credentials. So credentials and require, and then we can reference credentials.js. App.use, require, cookie parser, just allows us to use cookies, and then credentials, and cookie secret, which is that random weird string that we had there. Now that I have all that set up, I can come down here and touch on all those different things all at one time. So first thing I want to do is create the route for contact. So contact, and just like before, we're going to have our function with our request object and our response object inside of it. Here we're going to render a CSRF token, and these tokens are going to be generated in both the cookie as well as the form data, and then verified whenever the user posts information. Again, it's just for security reasons. And we'll have contact, and here we'll get more into this later on whenever we create a real application, but for now we can just go CRF token here. And then also I'm going to go and create another route, and I'm going to call this thank you, which is where we're going to send them after they send us different information in the form. So request, response, and here we'll just render our thank you handlebars file, which we also have to go in there and create. So let's jump over and create that view. So we go view, new file, and we'll just throw in some information. Thank you for your submission, just to keep that nice and simple. File, save as, make sure it has the same name, make sure it's saved in the views folder. Thank you, .handlebars, and click on save, and there, that's all set up. We can close that as well. And now we need to go in and actually process the form. So inside of here, you can see right here, process, and then form contact us. We're going to go in and create process to process that information that's being sent to us. And to do so, we'll go app, post, process, and then define the function that is going to actually process this. So we'll go response, and then we're just going to print out this information on the screen. I'd like to save it to a database or something, but that's what it will cover in the next part of the tutorial. And you can just go form, and then request, query form, and print out all the information that we'll be able to get from this guy. So console log, we could get our CSRF token, which we already know what that is. Go throw a colon inside of there, and to get that, again, request body dot CSRF. So open that up the whole way. They're also going to be sending an email inside of there. Again, that's going to be in request body, and this is just going to be email because that's the name that we have for it. So if we jump over here, you can see right here, there is our CRSF, and here we're going to have our email, which is defined right there. And then down inside of here, we're going to have a question, and you can have down inside of here is going to be the submit button. Jump back over here again, and we're also going to want to come in here and print the question that they entered into the form, and that was QUES. And then if we want to send them to our thank you page after we get all that information from the form that they sent us, we could go res, redirect, and we can go 303 and thank you. And if we typed all that in correctly, we should be able to test this out. First off, let's make sure we're in the right directory. Yes, we are. And then we're going to come in here and restart our server. And I have a little bit of an error. Over here, I named my file credentials. Let's come in here and open this up. Let's select everything, copy that, get rid of that. Let's go and delete it. So delete file. There, it's gone. And then let's go and create another one again in the Express Tut. New file. Paste that inside of there. File, save as, credentials.js. Save it. Now credentials there is spelled exactly the same as it was there. And credentials, little weird, silly things that come up. And if I restart the server and go to my contact page, you're going to say, uh-oh, the contact didn't show up. Why didn't it? I did this on purpose. The reason why is because it hits the 404 page before it gets to the contact down here. So what we're going to want to do is take all this stuff and move it up above it. So we're going to copy that because it's just like a pipeline. It goes through and it hits all the different requests and then serves up different functions depending upon the request. So the order is very, very important here. So we're going to cut that out of there. And then right after the About section, we're going to paste this inside of here. And now if we save it and then jump over here, restart our server again, now everything's going to work for us. So let's reload. Contact Us pops up right there. And you can see there's a submit. So I can come in here and type in this and something like, how are you? And click on submit. And you're going to see all this information pops up down here. Like I said before, we could go and save this information into the database or something like that, but I'll get into that in the next part of the tutorial. So that's how we process form information using Express and Node.js. So now I'm going to show you how to allow them to upload files to your server. And what we're going to do again is go into views and we're going to go new file. And I'm just going to paste this in here and go over this. Basically, the URL that we are going to catch, or the route we're going to catch, is going to be called file upload, and it's going to be passed a year as well as a month so that we'll be able to properly sort these images. And everything else here is just basic old HTML and with some Bootstrap styling, as you can see right here. And the important part right here is if we go down here, we're going to see that we're only going to be able to accept image files, again for security reasons. So that is that guy, and we're going to save that in our views directory once again as file upload, going to be the name for it, as well as handlebars. And that's going to import that, and we're going to save it. So we can close that out and go into the express.tut.js file again and handle those file uploads. To do so, we're going to go app.get again because it's going to be a route we're going to be dealing with. And whenever they go to file upload URL, we're going to go function request resource. We're going to go and get a date, being the current date, and we'll be able to store these a little bit better later on under usernames and dates and things like that. And render. Now we're going to render out to the screen this information. First thing we're going to render out to the screen is the file upload form that I just showed you a second ago. And we're also going to be passing in the year as well as the month. Might want to do milliseconds or something like that. And as you can see, this is going to receive it right there. So it's expecting the year and the month to be passed inside of there. So we will pass it inside of there. So go year. You can also see here an example of how we can pass in different elements to be used in a web page. So get full year and then month as well. And to get the current month, we'll go now, get month. And that is the array we'll pass into that. And now if we jump back over into file uploads, you can also see here that we are going to be passing year and the month, and we want to be able to handle this new type of URL. So if we jump over here, whenever they call just file and upload, we're going to just get the year and the month and show the form. And whenever they pass the month and the year, we want to be able to handle that differently. So again, we'll go app.get and create a new version of file upload. And in this new version, we're going to be expecting year and month to be passed inside of it, like that. And if year and month are passed inside of it, we want to be able to handle that. So we'll go function, request, response, close this off as well. And then inside of here, we want to parse our file that was uploaded. So we'll go var form equal to, this is where we use formidable, which is that middleware that we imported earlier. Incoming form. You can do a lot of other different things with formidable, but in this situation I'll just stick to uploading the image file. And then you just go parse, request, and we'll go function, potential error, fields, file. The file is going to be the important part here. However, we want to be able to handle any errors that could potentially occur here. And if there was an error, we'll just return and we'll say that we want to redirect to an error file that's going to be created here. Go 3. And we'll have to create that, of course. So we have to create our new view, and we'll just say something went wrong, something like that. File, save as. Over into views, we'll call this error error.handlebars. So that'll be the thing that shows up if there was an error. Jump back over into Express. Otherwise, if there wasn't an error, we'll say console, and we'll assume that we received our file. So we'll say that. And then we could store this and reference it in a database or whatever. But for now, I'm just going to print out all the file information on the screen. And then or in the console, and then we will redirect them again to our thank you page. And those all close off and everything looks fine there. And then if we jump over here and restart our server and click here and click on file upload, type in my name, type in my email address, and then select a random photo. And there is my photo, and then click on submit. And you can see right here, thank you for the submission. It sent me to the thank you page. And if we jump over here, you can see all the information that we obtained about the data that was passed over, the file information. And of course, in the next tutorial, I'll actually cover exactly how to store these images and do all that other different stuff whenever we cover MongoDB. And there is all the file upload and the other file upload route handling all on one page so that you'll be able to come in there and make sure that you typed in then correctly if you get an error of any type. Now I'm going to go in and talk about cookies. Now for cookies, I'm not actually going to create any views here. I'm actually just going to go in and handle them. So to handle cookies, I'm going to go app.get, and if they type in cookie on the screen for the URL, I'm going to get request and response. Now if they go to this page, we're just going to set a cookie, and to set a cookie you just go res cookie and then define whatever the key would be, which is going to be username, and then I can type in a value, and you can get this information from the login. And if we want to define a date in which this would expire, you can make this whatever you'd like. I'm just going to say expire, and then I'll go new date and then 999 and then send, and we can just output on the screen username has the value of Derek Vanis. And in this way we'll be able to both set the cookie and also output information on the screen. Now that we have the cookie set, we could also set it up so that we can show our stored cookies in our console. So we'll go app.get, and if they go to the URL of list cookies, go function, request, response, and here we'll just keep it simple and output the cookies in the console. It's going to output all the cookies, not just what we're setting here. And to get the cookies, we go request cookies, and then we could also send some information to the screen. This is why we don't need a view in this situation. Something like look in the console for cookies. And why don't we also come in here and actually cover how to delete cookies. We can go app.get again, and if they go to the URL of delete cookie, we can go function, request, and if we want to clear our cookies, we'll just go clear cookie, and then define the actual cookie we want to get rid of, which is going to be the key that we defined, which is username. And then in this situation, we can pass information to the screen that says username cookie deleted. If I'll save that, jump over here, restart our server, and reload, you can see that that didn't do anything, and we could go in here and just type in cookie. Username has the value of Derek Vanis, and you can see that it was looking for that cookie information right there. If we want to list our cookies, just type in list cookies. Look in the console for the cookies. You can see that the cookies all displayed here on the screen. I have another cookie in there from previously. And then we could also go in and delete cookie. And you can see right here, if we now go back to list cookies, look in the console for cookies, now you can see that the username cookie is not displayed in there. So that is how we create cookies, how we list cookies, and how we delete cookies. Now let's take a look at sessions. Now we're going to be able to store session information in a bunch of different ways, but for development reasons right now, and since we don't have a database all set up, I'm going to store everything in our memory store. So what we're going to need to do, come over here, shut down our server once again, and I'm going to need to go npm install save express session, and that's going to install that for us. There we go, everything looks good. And what this is going to allow us to do is store the session ID in a cookie and the session data on the server. Now, like I said, this works for development, but it wouldn't necessarily work in a regular server, because if the server is shut down, we are going to lose our session information, which we're shutting down our server every couple minutes, so that you can see how that would be a problem. We're going to come in here and import that module that we just set up there. We're also going to need to get ourselves another one of these guys, which is going to be parse URL npm install save parse URL. And this is going to provide info on the URL of the request object that is passed to us. So we need to get that. We'll go var parse URL is equal to require and parse URL, of course. And then app.use session. We're going to define a couple different defaults here. We're going to define resave as false. And this is basically saying we only want to save to the session store if a change has been made. And then we'll say save uninitialized and set that to true. And this is going to store session information if it is new, even if it hasn't been modified. And secret. And we're going to use our cookie secret that we saved in our credentials file. So credentials, make sure we save that or have the right name there. And once again, cookie secret is the name of it. And we can open that up. Just remember, see, cookie secret saved inside of there. So that's what we're using for security reasons, of course. So cookie secret, and that's all we need to do there. Now I'm going to provide you another example of middleware. So we're going to go app.use and create our function inside of here. Request, resource, next. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to set it up so that it's going to track how many times the user has gone to a specific page. So it's just a nice, easy example, but it's also going to show you how sessions can be used to track users, for example. So we'll define our total number of views of a specific page, and we'll say if there are not any views, come in here to the views section, and we're going to create an array here, which is going to have the key be the URL that they go to, and then the value is the number of times that they total went to that URL. And we'll go in here and get the path name that they currently are on and go parse URL. That's why we needed parse URL to come in and get the path name so we know what page they're on. And then in our views array, like I said, we're going to use the path name or the URL as the key. And then we'll go into views and set it, the total number of times that they've actually gone to that page. And that's either going to be 0 to start off, and we're going to increment it each time we go through. So each time they go to the page, we're going to increment that over and over and over again. And then of course next, because this is middleware, so that it continues down through the pipeline if we need to do anything else. And then what we need to do, remember this is middleware that's just going to increment every time we go to our URL. If we want to actually display that information on the screen whenever they go to it, we need to handle that. So we're going to say if they go to view count, this is going to be the URL that we're going to be tracking here with sessions. We want to get request, resource, next. And here we'll just print out some information on the screen, which is going to be the number of times that they viewed the page. And to send information to the HTML page, and I'll say something like you viewed this page, and then get the actual information that we stored in our session. So request, session, and we'll reference our views array. And remember, we set view count is going to be the key for that, and then we could go times, and that'll be displayed out on the screen. We can save that, and of course we need to come in here and restart our server. And we got a little bit of an error, and the reason why is I need to put quotes around this up here. Don't know why I missed that. And save it and restart our server. And then if we come over here, let's come down here, view count. This is the guy that's going to count the total number of times we go to this page. We can go view count, and it said you viewed this page 2 times. You can see it right there. Reload it 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, and you can see that it's tracking me each time I go to that page. And I could set this up that it would work for any of the other pages. So that's how sessions work in a simplified type of manner. Now I'm going to jump in here for the final thing. I'm going to show you how to both read files as well as how to write files using Express. Now I'm going to come in here. I'm going to need to download another module. Control-C, get rid of that. And that's going to be the file system module. So I'm going to have to go npm install save. Make sure you don't put it between the, or before the, or make sure you do put it before the 404 right here. And we're going to go var require fs, which is the guy we just installed there, app.get, and if they go to the read file directory, we're going to allow them to read a file. Function, request response, next. Now if we want to read the file, we have to tell it what file to read from. We just go fs, read file, and then we're going to have to reference a file. I think I have it inside of here. Yes, I do. Random file text, which is inside of my public directory. And to reference that, I'm just go dot public, and then the name of it, random file dot text, and then I need to actually handle that. Make sure if there's an error, I handle that, and then data is actually going to contain the file information, and we'll just say if there was an error of some type, return console error, and then print out whatever the error was. Otherwise, if there wasn't an error, that means that we received the data from our file. So we'll say we want to print that information out on the screen. We'll say res send, something like the file. It's perfectly fine. And then to get the information out of that file, we just go data. If we want to convert it to a string, we just say toString and close that off. And that's how we read information. And we can come in here and go read file right like that. Come in, restart our server. Up this, paste that in there. And you can see right there, it went and read all that file information, just a random file with random text. So that's how we read files. Now we'll cover how to write files. Again, app.get, write files is going to be the name of the directory that I have here, or the URL anyway. This is going to write and read a file. Request, resource, next, and we'll go write file, fs write file, and we just give it the name. It doesn't matter if the file doesn't exist, it will be created. And we'll just call this random file2.text. And then here, what we're going to do is actually define the text that we want to put inside of it. I'm just going to keep it very simple and just say more random text. That's what's going to be written to the file. And then I need to handle this. If there's an error of some type in writing to that file, if error, we'll just do something simple, console error, and then print out our error to our screen and let that close. So that we officially wrote to the file. Now if we want to go in and read from the file and print it out, just to make sure that it worked, we go read file, of course, just like we did before. We don't have to do anything special. Public, and we call this random file2 text. Get rid of that E right there, that would have thrown an error. And then we're going to do exactly the same thing before, error, data, and then we'll say if there was an error, same exact thing we did before. Return console error, pass back the error that occurred in reading from our file. Otherwise, we want to send out some information on the screen that says the file. Once again, get the data, convert it to a string, and output it inside of the browser. And throw that semicolon in there. Restart our server, and if we go to write file, now instead of read file, we got a little bit of an error. Let's go up here and change this to write file with a capital S or a capital F. Come over here, restart our server, jump over here, reload, and now you can see the file more random text pops up. So there you go, guys. That is an overview of a lot of things about Express. Like I mentioned before, in the next part of the tutorial, I'll cover MongoDB, and then we'll create a real Express application. Hope this helped a lot, and please leave your questions and comments below. Otherwise, till next time.